call the meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. It's 6:30. Welcome, everyone. First item is setting of the meeting agenda, and I have one request for a change. We're going to move under new business, item, what is it? Item G. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is going to move up to A, and everything else will shift down in the order that it is. Okay, so with that change, is there anything else from the board members?
I'll
to
make
change?
a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent agenda, I do have some corrections I'd like to make, so I'm going to ask that we move that down into the, under old business. We'll do it right before the report of staff. It shouldn't take long, but it'll be very boring for people in the audience. The next item is the public open forum. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? Okay, thank you. We'll close the public forum and move to the Citizen Advisory Committee update.
Madam President, managers, will you turn on the microphones, please? A home button. And then just unmute. All right, that should be a little bit better. Madam President, managers, the CAC met earlier this month. They went over the different topics that they were looking at implementing for 2019. The two major projects that they're looking at is supporting a district tour again, which we do have on the list of potential meeting dates on the schedule later in the agenda, as well as doing bringing the adopted drain program into the Forest Lake area, and that's something that Angie can tell you more about during that agenda item. Other than that, I don't know if the board was informed, but Jerry is stepping down as chair of the CAC. He will be doing his last meeting as chair in January, and the CAC will be electing a new chair.
He will still stay on the board, though, on the commission, I mean. Yeah. And there's just a couple of typos, basically, and in the minutes, if you don't mind. Under 2, second to the last sentence, the venue through, it should be which, I think, there instead of with. And then under the bullet point on page 2, wetland workshops, when you get to the suggestion that I made on the lake-specific workshops, that should be Lake District-specific workshops. So is our lake management districts, and that's due to their unique features in each one. And so those have to be tailored to the lake districts. And then just calling the board's attention to the second paragraph on page 1 under 3. Kurt Sparks made a very good suggestion on the, and I wanted to make sure that you saw it, for the Realtor workshop, to send thank yous to the ones that attended, and then ask if they'd like to be on our distribution list for further information, so that we're building relationships with that group of people. So I thought that was a really good suggestion as well. Okay, thank you for that, Jessica. Next is the new business, and we will start with our friends from the Sediment Corps.
Adam, if you want to come up and give an introduction. I'm Adam Heathcote. I'm a research scientist with the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, part of the Science Museum of Minnesota. We were the group who did the first Sediment Core project that was completed last year, and I am here to answer any technical questions that you might have on the work plan that we submitted to the district administrator, I guess a week and a half ago, to do a similar proposal on 2 new lakes that were not part of the original study. Those lakes were School Lake and Bone Lake.
I didn't have any questions on the proposal. I just, I know it takes a long time to look at that core sample and make your report, but if that part could be shortened somehow, so we're not waiting 12 months or 14 months to get the report.
I know that the earliest we'll be able to collect any samples will be this winter. And in general, it takes something like 6 months to get some of our analysis, just because we have so many other things going on in the laboratory. And so that's the major time constraint. Once we get those results in, the writing of the report is actually usually fairly quick. And so we can certainly do our best to expedite that portion once we get the results.
Yeah.
But
The
again-
information is so good and so critical to our planning process, understanding
Sure, sure.
what the lakes are really all about.
Sure, and I definitely appreciate, the wanting to get the results as quickly as possible to inform what you guys are going to do in the future. So we'll definitely do our best on that.
Madam President, I'll just note that, so Dr. Tyson from the University of St. Thomas has arranged for some funding from the university to pay for some student help along the process for some of the analysis. So that's going to build in some of the time factor in terms of assisting Dr. Heathcote, as well as the other researchers, of which they're not actually all at the station. You partner with individuals
Yep.
out in Washington State, and I think in
Yeah,
Alberta.
one of our scientists is, she's employed by us, but she's, works out of the state of Washington. That won't really slow us down. Again, it's mostly just the dating of the sediment course is the most time, the biggest time commitment. That's just because we have to wait till we collect the core, and then it goes into the queue with all the other projects that are going. And so, and we only have, one technician who's running those. So that's the main time constraint. And we don't want to start too many other things within the core until we have those dates back, because that really informs where we select the samples, how deep we go in the core, so that we are looking
Sure.
at the area of interest to you all.
Yeah, I understand. I just if.
Oh,
if it
no,
was-
I
if it
definitely
was
understand you're wanting to get that information, and we're really happy that you guys we're so happy with, the report and the fact sheets that we had for the initial part of the study, and we're interested in getting more information on your lakes, so thank you for that.
Good.
I just had one question. Since this reflects a change in the environment around the lakes, say from the 1840s on, and since Moody Lake was close by to the other two lakes, and with all farmland, would you expect any differences from what we already know in Moody Lake? So, the question is, why would we spend the extra money when it's probably going to be very similar to Moody Lake?
If I remember correctly, and Mike can correct me with how the flow works, but Moody and Bone are connected in some way, is that right?
Correct, flows
Right.
into the north
Yeah.
side of.
The difference is, every time water enters a lake, it can have a lake itself is a very efficient trapper of things like sediment and nutrients. And so what we want to find out is so for what we find in that lake may not be exactly what happens in the next lake. So that lake may have been acting, I'm not talking about Moody in particular, but any lake may have been acting as a sediment trap for so many years, and then started to fill in slowly, and then started to pass along sediment. And so knowing things like that, the timing of that, and where it happened and which lakes are important in that network of all the lakes that are in your watershed district can help you better pinpoint what are the lakes that you can do projects on that will have cascading effects all down the watershed. So this lake was, 100 years ago, functioning as a sediment or nutrient trap for other lakes below it, is now no longer doing that. So by doing work on this particular lake, you can actually improve the lakes that are all downstream to it. And so finding out things like that, how these lakes are interconnected and how they were historically functioning as nutrient or sediment traps, I think would be very useful to you and you all in your planning on looking at the greater watershed, all the different lakes that you have. Obviously, we can't do this study on every single lake. That wouldn't be it wouldn't be efficient for money or time, but by picking key lakes that are located in strategic points in the watershed, we can learn about a lot of the lakes just from them. So in one sense, I agree with you, but we've picked these lakes strategically so that they will inform us not only about the lake itself, but the ones around it, so downstream and upstream of it. But we also picked them because we thought that those lakes in particular might be of interest to both you all and the local people who are living around them. Bone Lake in particular, I believe, has a pretty active lake homeowners association, and that was one of the
Lake is pretty
considerations.
small, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so-
tiny, and
so
you look at something like Forest Lake or
Sure.
larger lakes around.
So School Lake, the main interest was that it is basically the last stop before you get into the Little Comfort Lake main watershed, and so it's going to be integrating a lot of what was happening up the watershed, before you get into that tributary that goes from School. I forget what the other lake that's.
Birch.
School, Birch, and then Little Comfort, and so by selecting that one, we can basically then extrapolate back all the way up watershed of Comfort and Little Comfort, which I think are also, well, Comfort was part of the initial study, and Little Comfort is also probably a lake of interest to a lot of the people in the district.
Yes,
President,
Mike?
one more item. I will note that Dr. Funke and Dr. Heathcote, when they met with me to talk about these proposals, we initially were thinking that we wanted to do Birch Lake and School Lake. But Dr. Heathcote had given a number of sufficient reasons, just as he articulated, why Birch was not necessarily a very good idea, and that we would get more value out of going to Bone Lake, and that's why we have proposed those two at this time. You know, I think if we get to Forest Lake at some point in the next series, there's a case where we would want to consider a minimum of the 2 basins, maybe all 3. I know they would have an interest in doing all 3,
Right.
given the complexity.
We have a lot of things to spend our money on and not much money, so it's
Sure.
always good to question.
No, I
feel
appreciate
more
the candor, and that, in the conversation that we had with Megan and Mike, and Dr. Tyson was there as well. One of the reasons we switched Bone for switched in Bone and for Birch was because there was some redundancy in doing both Birch and School, and that they are subsequent in the watershed, and so we thought we could get enough information out of School to tell us what was probably going on in Birch, and so we wanted to go to another part of the watershed where we could get a lot more information for a single
Obviously,
corner.
that logic wasn't in the letter, so I didn't have the.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, yep.
Well, I would have had the same question as Steve did, because pretty much with Moody and Shields, those are both at the top of the watershed in different areas, and then Comfort is at the end. And we pretty much saw similar
Yeah,
results in all of them, but, you know, to me, if we do, you know,
yeah, I think,
I'm okay with doing it, but it's one of those things, like Steve said, we've got a lot of other things to spend our money on, but if it's something that we're gonna get value for,
Yes,
Madam
Mike?
President, I think, yes, I think we do. You know, one of the things that we've really focused on in our, both adaptive management, but also through our diagnostic process, is collecting sufficient information. Because when we identify projects that are low cost in terms of pounds of phosphorus reduced per the unit, the cumulative effect on the cost factor is pretty substantial. I mean, we can get into the tens of millions of dollars. So by really focusing on the cost benefit side and understanding these systems up front, we are often better able to then identify projects, or at least the capability of these lake systems in what we can do with them. So that's really the main, I think one of the principal things here that we were really after in terms of like, what are these systems really capable of? And Bone Lake is really sufficiently different enough from the fact that the majority of the drainage area is coming from that east and southeast drainage area. That in fact, I'm not 100% sure that the conveyance from Moody Lake into the north part of Bone and out has always been historically there, versus going from Moody down, bisecting in a southwesterly pattern across some of those wetlands.
that could have been just part of a big wetlands. I mean, when they
Right.
put the road through, they could have blocked it off for that matter, because it's a big wetland system.
Right, so what's
across there.
happening over time, and Bowen happens to have the deepest spot right in the center of the lake where it's the narrowest, which is interesting, but that'll serve as a good location for the Corps.
any other questions? Thanks.
Well, I have one.
Oh,
As
sure.
long as
Yeah,
everybody's
yeah,
asking
go.
questions. No,
Please.
I just wanted to ask you, as the scientist, if there is a difference with lakes that are part of a river system.
So they can be more difficult. We've worked on Lake St. Croix, which is a truly riverine lake, and that is just basically a river that gets very wide. The difficulty is the more riverine they are, so the more the river is the primary influence, the less confidence we have in that the sediment is being deposited uniformly, and then that will start to violate some of the assumptions we use. So we assume in a lake, in the middle of the lake has had very minimal disturbance, so every pile of sediment is sequential, and so that's how we can establish a chronology. And so in river systems where you could have huge amounts of sand and mud moved during storm events, that may not be the case, and so it's much more difficult to do these types of analyses in rivers.
All right,
Does
thank
that
you.
answer your question?
It does,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to item now
Madam
B.
President, we need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do, don't we? All right, is there a motion to accept the sediment proposal for 2019?
I'll make a motion to approve, Phase 2 deep sediment core study, Bone Lake and School Lake, not to exceed an amount of $44,250. And direct the administrator to enter into a contract with St. Croix River Watershed Research Station.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, now we will move on to item B, 18-023 Shoreview variance request.
Madam President and managers, the applicant, owner of the property is here if there's any questions. I think you have another item that was handed out at the beginning of, or just prior to the meeting here in terms of the request. Yes, the individual that's here on behalf of the project site, or the permit, is Greg Radefeld, and you can just raise your hand and the board knows who you are. So he's available if you have any questions.
Do you want to give us a little background here, set up on that? And then also you brought a map that shows the property a little better than our small map.
Oh, sure.
Was it just the one copy? Oh, there it is.
You can hand one down here. Anything else too?
Did you keep this?
I have a copy.
Okay, all right. All right, he's got one.
Oh,
You want me to
Yes,
sure.
please.
hunt down the permit? So, Madam President and managers, in front of you have permit 18-23. This project involves a lot split and then also some associated after-the-fact grading that occurred. So there was a small amount of, well, first, also, so this project is off of West Comfort Lake Drive, so it's on the west side of Comfort Lake. So the grading that I mentioned, there was some little bit of clearing and grading that happened without a permit earlier this year. The DNR issued a restoration order, and that area has now been reseeded with native vegetation along the shoreline where that grading occurred. The second part of this project, since they're subdividing and creating 2 or more buildable lots, is the buffer rule is triggered with that. And so for Comfort Lake, being that it's a general development lake, the required buffer is 25 feet. So you can see that's highlighted and proposed on this plan sheet in purple there along the lake, between the homes and the lake. But there's also a wetland to the north there, that green area, that is a managed 2 wetland, which per our rules requires a 50-foot buffer. This is the buffer area in question that the applicant has requested a variance for. The applicant's reasoning for the variance request, or why they've requested it, is that the wetland there is currently being managed as a landscape pond, and then also the fact that the wetland itself won't be on the resulting property. It essentially butts up to the property line, at least as it's proposed with the shift. Although it is a landscape pond, looking at historic aerials, it does indicate that that area was a wetland and likely excavated out at the time that the house was built on the lot to the north there. The other factor that the applicant has mentioned is difficulty with getting the septic areas needed for the lot, with that 50-foot buffer area kind of encroaching on the septic area to the east of that wetland area. However, I would note that the district rules do allow for buffer averaging, so I think it would be within the rules for them to narrow up the buffer on that side and widen it to the west. However, then gonna end up with even kind of a funnier looking buffer there that's just just barely touching the wetland and then extending quite a ways out into the lot. So that's a bit of background. My recommendation for the permit as a whole is approval, but pending what the board wants to do with the variance request. And as the board has indicated to me previously, they've asked me not to provide a specific opinion on the variance, but to leave that up to the board for discussion. And I believe the district staff has also at least filled in some of the variance request criteria pieces so that the board could have a bit more information as they consider their thoughts on that variance. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions or be involved in that discussion.
Who wrote the response on the criteria?
Aaron and I worked on the responses, but a lot of that also comes from the applicant's variance
Yeah, I
request.
saw that he had some written also. Okay.
Did you have anything to add, Mike?
Yes, Madam President. One is just that I had talked with the authorized agent, Mr. Radefeld, and I understand it as of today, or as of right now, you now are also the owner and not Mr. Gilbert. So you're.
Correct,
So
yeah,
you.
a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Right, so, okay, so we would want to note that in the record as well, and in the change for the permit application itself, that it would go directly to Mr. Radefeld. And I also understand from speaking with your son-in-law, not you directly, that you were receptive to the idea of having some buffer, but some adjustment in this area. And I think what Greg was describing in terms of some averaging might work in that favor. But again, that's only what was conveyed to me from your son-in-law today.
Yes,
So-
correct. They're currently the owner that mows and maintains it like a kind of a park, and they aerate and treat the water in it. That's why it's because of the fouling from the geese, but that's why the water quality is better.
Right, and just as a side note, I have not talked to the neighbors, but I had asked staff here at the end of the week when we were looking through this, to research a little bit more of the historical piece. So really, while they are including a letter that says it's man-made, it is clear from the historical photos and other mapping documents that we have that there was a wetland there. It probably wasn't open water, so it was probably man-made from the standpoint that it was excavated. And then the lack of buffers, and as you're describing also with geese, geese do not necessarily like buffers because they might fear that there's a predator in there, is only adding to the problem of its water quality. So that's, again, just something that we could convey to them, and we do have a cost share program to assist with establishing some native vegetation in that area if they were interested, and to connect to what buffer might exist depending on the board's decision on this matter.
I would like to ask our attorney if there is any legal issues we need to be aware of before we start discussing this.
Madam Chair, board members, it's really a matter of your considering each of the 5 criteria and weighing them all together and making a judgment as to whether there is a practical difficulty for full compliance with the buffer, and whether it's appropriate to.
Okay, I'm particularly talking about the fact that this man-made pond, as it's referred to, has 2 references in our documentation that it's actually may have been created, but it's still listed as a managed to wetland. I mean, that's in the document from Kelly Beaupre. And MNRAM program classifies this as a managed to wetland. And then on the second page of our permit application, 18-023, under 4, second paragraph, basically says the same thing. So we're dealing with what is classified as a wetland, and we're being asked to approve a variance for impacts to that wetland. So that was my specific request for any kind of legal issues that we might run into.
Madam Chair, first of all, for the purpose of the rule, the basin is, based on the record that we have, the basin is a wetland, and therefore the buffer requirement does apply. If it had been an artificial basin that was dug, for example, then the buffer wouldn't apply. The present condition of the wetland comes into play when you consider the criterion of whether the variance would comport with the spirit and intent of the rules, where you can look at what is the function and the value of the wetland in its present condition, to what extent would allowing a reduced or a buffer or eliminating a buffer here undermine the purposes of your rule, which is to protect the wetland function and value and further downstream waters. So the extent to which the wetland has been altered so that it does not have a strong function and value would tend to weigh in toward the granting of a variance, but you may also look at whether at some point that wetland may return to a higher function, and therefore there's a purpose in enforcing the requirement at this time.
I don't see any guidance that in any of the memos that says that that's not a functioning wetland, only that it's been turned into a pond.
I think
So I don't see any reference to that particular
and
statement.
your engineering staff can give you the technical assessment of that.
So the basin is a wetland per all the information that we have at this point in the historical documents. The basin has obviously been altered and degraded by man-made activities, but it is still a jurisdictional wetland.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, well, just to start this off, the request for variance on the front page lists basically what our responsibility is, and that is to not only consider what's been discussed here so far, but also if there were alternatives to granting the variance. Have you looked at all alternatives? And that's the one that I think I'm not quite comfortable with just yet. The small map that we got, it was difficult to see where the outline of the septic system is. And I don't know if you can blow that up, but this is the one that we received in 8.5 by 11 format. And it looks like that septic area, that 10,000 square foot septic area in the northern part of this map, looks like it goes well into that purple area, the buffer area. So I just wanted clarity on that.
Yes, that's correct. So the septic area is outlined there, and that purple buffer does encroach into it there.
And do you know what that square footage encroachment is?
Oh, well, the total area, that purple area is about 5,000 square feet, so maybe that's, I don't know, 1,500 square feet, something like that.
Is there any way for that area to be moved into the open area? Would be, I suppose, down in the front of the house or the front of that lot?
Yeah, that area, and that can be done within the district rules, is that area could be moved, kind of on the west side, kind of down where it says Lot 1 there, and to kind of make up for the lost area over there.
You're talking about the buffer being moved down there.
Yep.
Okay, I'm talking about the septic area. If you
Oh.
wanted to keep that, but if you can move the buffer area down in that area and still have, meet the rules, then that's an option as well.
I don't know the answer to that question, if whether the septic area could be wrapped around the house, that would need to be determined by the city and the soil borings based on the soil types in there. I don't know if the applicant has any.
Was that discussed or looked at?
Well, when we did this, there was no indication we needed 50 feet from that pond. We thought it would be, in a sense, a lake is 25 feet.
Mine used to go
Obviously, 50 feet more.
This lot line, did it used to go straight across there?
Pond, which I say is manicured all the way around, and there is no outlet out of that into the lake. So going through the process with the planning commission of Wyoming and the city council,
So has that
and there are people that was never
neighbors
brought
on that
up
now?
that are setback, and they approved all the plans as it was without knowing that the setback would be 50 feet versus or 25 feet. Logic kind of would be that you'd rather keep the mound system away from the lake because they get a little intrusive and whatever than this ponding area. And like I say, I don't think with a $600,000 house, anybody would ever let that pond go back into bulrushes and stuff. So, I mean, that was the deal there. The other thing is with putting a house on there, if you move it over, you're gonna cramp the square footage, and the township was really.
Could I ask you to come to the mic? I'm sorry.
The township was really adamant in the size of the building pad. It was smaller and they wanted it bigger in all reality because you're talking about a 160-foot lot on the lake. The value of the lot versus the value of the house that's probably going to go on there is going to justify a little bigger house. So we made the pad larger to accommodate their requirements. And that's kind of how we got to that point. So when we moved the septic system, the 10,000 feet, granted, you're right, they don't have to be a square 100 by 100 foot. You can make it a little weird looking, but to wrap it around closer to the lake and then bring it around in front of the house would be kind of unusual. My personal feeling is it would be a worse trade-off to get closer to the lake than it would be closer to a manicured pond. But
Are you talking about the buffer?
the buffer,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, there is a buffer along the shoreline.
Yeah, but it's 25
So no one's
feet.
talking about doing anything to that one.
No, but if we move the mound system down closer
Septic, yeah.
to the
Well,
lake,
But you have setback requirements for that, so you wouldn't be able to do that.
we got 25-foot setback, right?
75.
Or 75? Yeah.
75-foot setback.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And if there's a bluff, I don't think this one has a bluff, so it's the
No, there's no
75-foot setback. Yeah.
Then there was mention of grading. We never did any grading to the lot or to the deal. We removed some stumps, but in effect, there was no grading in effect done, but.
This lot to the north of you, it looks like that lot line used to go through the wetland.
Correct. And when we bought it, the lot line went right through the deal. In the city, it's just going to be a headache. It would be a massive headache for both the township or the city and for the homeowners. The homeowner to the north manicures that whole thing and mows it, and like I say, aerates and treats the pond, and they're forever chasing geese out of there. Well, if the pond stayed in this lot, and these people that buy that lot say, no, we're not going to do that. We want to do, it would just create a problem. So that's why we decided to alter that lot line, to put it all onto
And
northern.
is that been recorded now? I mean, obviously this is a,
It's
it's showing the change, but is this currently, the way it's showing on here, is that currently part of that lot then?
the deed hasn't been.
Recorded by the county as that?
No, it's not been recorded. It's in the process of it. There's quite a lag time in there and with the recording process. The legal description's been cut out, and I think the title work has been done by Winsmith, but it's not been recorded yet. And it
Right.
might be some time before the recording.
I guess I would rather make a variance myself, when we've got a legally recorded document. Personally, because if it doesn't go through, then we gave a variance to something that, he could have brought this up closer to the wetland and.
Yeah, that's a good question for Chuck, but I'm stunned that the city of Wyoming didn't involve the district before approving this, because they know what our rules are. And it's not a question about complying with them, so I'm a little stunned by this. But the other things that I want to talk about here are really on page 1 of the request for variance. It's all laid out on what our responsibilities are. And we have to be careful about granting variances. They shouldn't be granted unless there's a very unique situation. And so I'm wrestling with those 5 points. The practical difficulty results from special conditions that apply to the structure or land in question and do not apply generally to other land or structures in the district. The special conditions causing the practical difficulty were not created by the landowner's agent or representative or contractor. The practical difficulty is not solely a matter of diminished economic return from use of the property. The variance will not merely serve the convenience of the applicant, and the variance is consistent with the spirit and intent of the rules. So I'm struggling personally with this project, because clearly that was a man-made change to a wetland, and the fact that they're mowing around it is irrelevant to me. I mean, maybe they should have a buffer around their portion as well. And so the buffer goes around this wetland like it should, whether it's man-made now or not. It's still considered and rated as a wetland. And so our duty is to protect that. The other thing that bothers me is having a septic system that is going to be used potentially. I know that this is 2 areas, right? You've got a primary and a secondary.
Correct.
In that area. So even if the primary goes more to the east, if the other one is used, it's going to be on soil that's wetland soil.
No, before you can designate a area for a mound system, they have to have, and that's what Beaupre did. He has to do all the borings to prove that it's not a wetland.
But it is a wetland. It's still listed as a wetland.
Well, I guess we'd have to pull up Beaupre's borings, because it would be, you could not put your 10,000 square foot within a wetland area.
Well, it's the buffer area technically, so you're right.
From a practical aspect, though, I mean, the intent of that water as being a wetland has been lost because it's being mowed around 95% of it. So, I mean, if you could move is there any way that owner to the north can be held responsible to actually put a buffer in, or that was predated our rule, I guess, is that correct? Chuck, do you know?
Manager Schmaltz, my understanding from staff is that that work was probably done in the early 1990s.
Right.
It wouldn't, in any event, it wouldn't trigger a buffer. In theory, if the work was improperly done at that point, there could be a requirement to restore it back to a more natural wetland condition. But 26 years after the fact, I don't expect that the city would be doing that.
So from a practical aspect, you made a comment when you first spoke about the fact that one of the considerations should be whether or not adding or changing the buffer would offer any negative or any positive benefits to the water body. And with only 5% of the lake being buffered, you can move all that buffer area all around, and it's not going to add much value to making it a better wetland, as far as I can see. So I would suspect that from a practical aspect, it's not going to make a lot of difference. And if you look at the contour lines, the contour seems to be flowing towards the lake, not towards the wetland. I'm sure there is some flow to the wetland, but at least on the east side, it's going down towards the lake. And actually on top is pretty flat. So I'm not sure that granting a variance would offer any adverse consequences to the future value of that property or that lake as a wetland. Unless, of course, we can get buffer put all around it, and that's where my interest would lie, but obviously we can't do that because it was occurred before we had any rules, so.
Greg, do you have any comment on that flow question that Manager Schmaltz brought up?
Yeah, so the east side of the property and the house and the impervious areas looks like it's generally going to flow towards the lake. There would be some area on that west side that would flow down through that buffer area and to the wetland. But I suspect the bulk of the impervious area would flow to the lake through the buffer over on that side.
What is this drainage easement on the north side of this property? Existing drainage easement, it says. What is that?
So, the city will often have easement along property lines to allow for drainage and flow, and it looks like there's maybe even an existing easement of some sort that was put around the wetland historically. I don't know if, kind of looks like it here on the far south end of that wetland. I don't know if the applicant is familiar with.
No.
But generally, that stuff on the north line, that's quite common to have drainage easements along lot lines to allow for flow to get down to the lake.
From the roads?
From the road or whatever's, coming from the lots from the north and south that are going there, or.
Well, then wouldn't that make this buffer more important? If there's water coming down this drainage easement from the road area, then a buffer in that area, I would think would be very important to slow the rate and also treat some of the water that's eventually going to end up in Comfort Lake.
Well, if I can say, there is no ditch along that line. There is a ditch along the road with culverts leading to the southerly property line of both properties. And then there's a ditch line that runs down that southerly line, which kind of directs the flow of the water to the lake.
Okay. Have we investigated that? Do we know that to be true?
I have not investigated the specifics of those easements, no.
So I have a question. If this lot on the north ends up, it's currently undeveloped?
Correct.
No, there's a home on the property.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
There's a home on the property. It's
Oh,
developed.
you're saying the northern,
Oh, there-
not our property, but the adjoining property to the north? The one that has the pond?
Okay. So that's already been established. I was gonna say if that's a new lot.
Well, part of the consideration in giving them additional property on that line is that their pole barn up by the road has a blacktop apron out the back. And so if there was a drainage ditch there, it would be right on the edge or into that. But there is no ditch, there is nothing up there, because he mows that whole property right up to the road.
Well, there's something recorded as a drainage easement because
Well,
it's-
there's,
yeah.
usually, like you're saying, most cities or whatever have not only a drainage easement, but a utility easement on most property lines, just to curb any future problems if people want to, don't want to contest something the city isn't looking. Almost all projects have drainage and utility easements.
You said before that this had a smaller house footprint when you first went to the city of Wyoming. Would that have changed this septic area? So that you didn't need as big a
No,
one?
not necessarily.
Okay.
They just wanted to cover all bases, that you could put a so many square foot house with the garage on that parcel. I mean, it's a 1 acre parcel, but you got to eliminate anything. You have to get a 10,000 square foot piece that is above modeled soil. And so you just can't just throw 10,000 square feet just because you have an acre. You have to meet certain criteria, and that's what Beautray did. He
Yeah,
did
no,
the
I
boring.
understand that, but you also have a septic area that's delineated already that is near that house. So my question was, if your house is reduced to 3,000 square feet, then doesn't that give you enough room for a septic system in that same area, but not part of that purple buffer area? Wouldn't that be possible?
Well, anything's possible, but the city is the ones that actually required, because our initial plan showed a smaller footprint. They requested the larger footprint. That's how it ended up to be.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. That's why I asked if you had a smaller footprint, and would that change? It should be able to accommodate then that septic system without going into the buffer zone.
You have to be so many feet away from your house and
Yeah.
from property lines.
Well,
and
it's
stuff.
right now butting right up against that house pad drawing, so I wouldn't see that it would be any different.
Could we add another foot to the 25-foot down by the lake and say that we're getting the same square footage of buffer?
Well,
Or-
now that's a good question for the engineers, because if this drainage easement is coming right through that buffer zone area, if it was more concentrated down in that shoreline area, maybe that's a little bit wider, down at the terminus of the drainage easement near the lake, would that help? It's like a rain garden, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think having more buffer along the lake, I wouldn't say specifically related to the drainage easement, but just along that lake in general would provide more treatment from,
Well, we know that that's where
that would probably.
water was designed to go. We
Right.
know that. So,
That, I would agree that would probably provide more buffer benefit than having this large buffer up here.
okay.
No, I agree 100%. That's why when we did some work on the hill and pulled out the stumps, we only disturbed like 100 feet of shoreline. We didn't just go into the lake. We took out ice heave. We left a buffer on both the north and south side, even though the one neighbor wanted us to go. He said, we didn't get involved in it because we did leave a decent buffer there, but it's something that could be enhanced if you wanted it to make a sediment pool with a rain garden type thing down there in consideration with narrowing the buffer, we sure could do that.
And I don't know that it would even necessarily need to be a rain garden. I mean, that'd be nice, but I mean, just making that buffer wider,
Natural, yeah.
natural.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, we have, it would make a whole lot more sense to do that. And the other thing to consider is this thing at one time was a farm field where we bought. So they were spraying that and they weren't doing a whole lot of good. And I'm sure they weren't
Yeah.
watching the phosphorus level that they were using. Their function is to increase their corn yield, not.
We know, and that's why the rules are the way they are, and that's to not have what happened in the past. but to improve upon it for the enjoyment of future generations, existing and future generations. So I think that's a very good suggestion, that we use that buffer down toward the lake. That would satisfy, I think, what could be a real problem with that drainage coming down directly from, excuse me, the roads and that upper area of that easement. So I like that idea.
Okay.
So I think what I'd like to see is a redrawn buffer area, I guess. Greg, I think you need to take, our engineers need to take a look at that and make sure that it meets the district's requirements.
So just to clarify what we're discussing, if we took the square footage the difference between 25-foot setback and 50, took that square footage in that area and added that to a buffer from basically where that pond would be to the lake, and use up that square footage for a buffer in there, that would be considered a conveyance?
Yeah, I believe that's what the board is considering. So my interpretation of that is we would still leave the 25 feet on the wetland up here, so which would be a relatively small chunk. And then kind of that area that's between the 25 and 50, we'd eliminate that up on top and then take that same amount of area and apply it to the buffer along the lake. And we could talk about whether that's just, a fixed additional width all the way along there, or if it's maybe a little wider, up towards the north end of this lot where the drainage easement is or whatever. But correct me if I'm wrong, board, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm,
We're
well, and I also I was wondering, when I look at this map, I mean, it shows 25 feet from the lot line. But I was wondering why, if you look at that 25-foot contour, like from the tip of the wetland and you go around on his property line, I wasn't quite sure why we had to come so far out on that lot line myself, but do you know what I'm saying?
I'm not quite
Okay,
following.
so, can you see what I'm saying here, Mike?
Right.
It's 25 feet, it
Right.
wraps around the south end of the wetland, but we've got the 25 feet coming like way out in,
Our requirement is a 50-foot for that
oh,
wetland,
50 foot.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
for that type of wetland.
all right.
So what we would look at is something, I think
gotcha.
as I'm understanding from the board as well, and what you seem to be agreeable to, is to move that line somewhere closer on that 25-foot area. I think we could do some averaging to keep it out of the septic area, and then take that additional square footage down towards the lake side of it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't know, Greg, can you, to save ourselves both time going back and forth, can you sketch out what you'd like to see or send me a deal, and I can take that over to Winsmith, have them draw it up, and then have you look at it again, make sure we're both thinking in the same line.
Sure, yep,
That'd
we
be great.
can touch base
Perfect.
after the meeting or
So do we have to come back to the board again to get it done, or if we?
Pending any recommendations, or,
Yeah, we still want to take a look at the final outcome and make sure that it is what we've been talking about. But I think we can do that conditioned upon a satisfactory drawing from our engineers. Chuck, do you have any suggestions? Anything you want to say on that?
If the board wishes to, if the board wishes to be the body that approves the final buffer, it would need to come back to you. You could either take no action tonight pending that, or you could approve the variance with the condition that describing the buffer redistribution and that it will come back to you for final approval. It won't save any time ultimately, but it would establish, basically the certainty for both sides that the matter had been worked out in a particular way.
Yeah, I was leaning more toward the tabling or the no action at this meeting and get the final drawing from our engineers and our staff back, and then we can take the formal action.
And when is the next
I
meeting? A
personally
month
would
or-
be okay with, I would make a motion to grant a variance, pending what we talked about here, where we're not losing, where we're getting net phosphorus removal and buffer, and pending any recommendation by the engineer.
I would support that also, so we have some confidence that it's going to be approved for the requester.
Well, I don't think there's any nefarious intent.
No.
Where you wouldn't get this. Obviously, we're working with you. We just want to make sure that,
Yeah.
that everything is as we assume it will be.
The only, and I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but obviously, we want to market that lot as soon as we can. And we really can't market it until we've got it pinned down. You don't want to promise people something that's not going to happen. So that's why there's a little bit of, waiting another month is just another.
Well, you're going to wait another month anyway. It's just a formality of what we're going through here, of
Okay.
process. That's all we're talking about. Your time isn't going to be any different.
Madam
Yes.
President, Mr. Radfeld had asked a question. Our next board meeting will be January 10th.
Hopefully I'll be in the sun on January 10th, but
Okay.
I can have a representative show up.
Madam Chair? Just one other option would be to approve the variance now with the final buffer location authority basically delegated to one or two managers with the advice of the engineer for final approval.
Well, I think I'd rather have the full board do that kind of approval. We're not talking about a long distance between now and the 10th of January. Would it be ready by then, Greg?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so did you make the motion?
I did.
Or did you just state a desire?
I did, just in the interest of getting it done, but
I would second that motion.
okay.
And would you restate the motion? Jessica, do you have it?
The recording has it.
Shall I take a shot at it?
Yes.
And maybe slightly rephrase it, suggest that the motion is to approve the variance with a 25-foot buffer on the wetland and the remaining square footage of that buffer redistributed along the lakeshore and brought back before the board for final approval.
At the point of the drainage easement. That's what we're talking about. So make sure that the position of that buffer is stated. Because we're talking about it here. You don't want it anywhere on the shoreline. You want it specifically in that area.
Madam President, I think in terms of that drainage easement area, Jessica, if you could pull up that photo again. And I think as Mr. Radefeld had stated, so there is no swale or other conveyance at that point, but rather it's a mechanism that the city would offer, incorporate a way to get access, and then if for some future reason they wanted to put a utility or some other conveyance, they could. Because we know in areas like Hilo Lane where they do not have a conveyance or any access, then they have no right to do such an activity, and then we end up with these issues with private landowners neighboring with such issues. So I think from both what we can see from this location and prior to all this activity, I do recall that there was corn in that field, and having looked at it, and of course then we looked at it again from the shore view, some of these other photos, there is no conveyance along the property line other than the natural topography. And so I think what the engineer was proposing is that maybe the line of the buffer be skewed a little bit heavier to the north, only because that's where more of the drainage is actually physically occurring presently. So,
Okay, I'm gonna withdraw my motion, and I think we all know that if everything's right, we're willing to grant a variance on this. So, I'm gonna allow Greg to work with the contractor homeowner and work out the buffers where it makes sense to work them out so that there's no net loss or whatever. And then January 10th is 20-some days away, so.
Yeah, bring it back to the board for action.
I just, I hate to keep confusing the issue. And I don't care. I mean, to me, we're mentally on the same track. But what Greg was talking about is going from the pond towards the lake with a buffer area. And what Mike was talking about is going partially the other direction towards the road. So do you know what our intentions are, Greg?
that's not what I was suggesting.
My understanding is that we are reducing the buffer width on the wetland and increasing the buffer width along the lake, and, you know, kind of strategically putting that where it'll provide the most benefit along there.
Not necessarily saying on the lake, but on the north strip going to the lake.
Right, that's what I heard as well,
Yeah,
is along that drainage easement area.
right. But you also, Mike wants a strip going towards the blacktop?
No.
No.
No,
Oh,
I
no.
was just stating that there is, in terms of the drainage easement,
Okay.
there is no swale
Okay, no,
presently.
Right.
And neither is there one on the lake shore side.
correct.
And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's really a lot of benefit of putting all of that buffer just in that 10-foot area, but rather, I thought I had understood originally that the board was suggesting that we add whatever square footage or along the lake shore itself, instead of a 25-foot buffer, that there would be 27 or 20, whatever it comes out to.
That's what I thought we were talking about also.
Right.
All the way along the shoreline?
Yeah,
Or in
Correct.
that concentrated area?
No, there's not a concentrated area.
I was talking about, I mean, these guys can work together if we can get the same area around the lake as we're losing up there, and it probably makes more sense along the lake. You know, if you can go a few more feet out all along the lake for both lots, you might.
Are we talking now, we were talking going from the pond in a strip down to the lake. I think
That's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting that, kind of as Manager Mo was stating, of increasing the buffer width along the lake, but maybe making it a bit wider on that north end, because you can kind of see things are kind of sloping up towards that area, and it probably just makes sense to have it a little wider right there.
On that north end, square footage, what you, I
Right.
mean, I'm trying to get, I hate to belabor the issue, but we don't want a buffer going along the lake so people can't mow their grass and stuff down to the lake. I mean, they want a yard out in front between their house and the lake, so we're not talking about putting a buffer along the shoreline there. We're talking north side, we're not talking that many square feet.
No, we are talking along the shoreline. So there's already a buffer there, right? It's 25 feet along the shoreline. And then we'd, you know, take whatever that extra area is, widen that up a little bit, and then maybe kind of make it go more just straight north, so it's a little bit wider on that north east corner there.
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah. all
It's a little
right.
bit of
So,
both, I
yes.
guess.
Basically,
But-
just
but-
using
but-
up what you're losing.
Right.
We're not taking anything more.
Right.
All right, fine.
I think, and we can talk about how to make that so it's not impeding access to the lake or something, but the idea would be to get that in places where it would be capturing water that's coming down from the impervious areas and the lawns.
Now, I have a question for our legal advisor. If we are going to keep the buffer area, but just repurpose it in other areas, does that really need a variance? The lot itself is going to have the same amount of buffer.
Madam Chair, board members, the buffer requirement applies on a water body basis,
Okay,
so it would be a variance.
okay, I just wanted to ask.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Well,
And
thank you.
Greg, you're gonna get to me with something so I know specifically what to have hold.
Yep, I'll follow up with you after
Just make that a-
the board meeting, like
about
either
tracking
tomorrow or early next week, and we'll,
the work with that. And come
All right.
back to us with a plan. Did you do that?
I didn't make a motion, but I'll make a motion that Greg and,
Mr. Radical?
Greg and
Tim?
Greg,
that you work together and,
With staff?
come up with a buffer that makes sense, and then we take a look at it at the January 10th meeting.
Yeah, I'll second that motion. Any further comments?
Just one comment, and it's kind of coming out of left field here, but the property line hasn't been formalized, and the property line went through the southern part, third of the lake, of the wetland there, right?
correct.
So why not change the property line? You're taking a lot of property from the south lot and giving it to the north lot. Why not move that lot line up and leaving like 3 feet around the lake? So you could have a buffer around that bottom third. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, we already got the legal descriptions and it's
Okay,
in the
that's why I
process.
said it, but that would allow us to put a lot of buffer right on that bottom third of the lake, of the pond.
Yeah.
But I just brought it up, so
Yeah, we're,
making more changes, I know.
Yeah.
So let's go with the motion the way it is.
all right,
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is the 18-041 Forest Lake Retail Permit Application.
You know, the other lesson here is, like you pointed out, President Anderson, that Wyoming needs to work with us more closely.
Oh, yeah,
Because you could have just made the suggestion I made very easily and solved the problem.
exactly. Or the one that we just came up with.
Right.
Is anyone here to represent the,
Yes, Madam President,
okay,
and an agent for the applicant is here, Laura Clarence, and she's in the back. So,
Madam President and managers, in front of you, you have permit 18-041. This property is located in Forest Lake, right off of Broadway Avenue. If you're familiar with where the Taco Bell is, it's just east of the Taco Bell. There's an existing service station or gas station on the property that's gonna be demoed and removed. And this will be a new building that'll be a combination restaurant and retail use. This project, a portion of the site flows to the existing Broadway iron enhanced sand filter system. So it goes through ponds and then eventually to that filtration system. And that system was designed to meet the district rules. So a portion of the site will continue to drain to that. However, there's another portion that drains to the west over to some wetland areas, eventually up through Bixby and to the Sunrise without treatment. So for that portion of the site, the applicant is proposing a biofiltration system that's designed to meet the district's rules. The site also incorporates erosion control measures, silt fence, inlet protection, rock construction entrance, all that good stuff. So that's pretty straightforward. It meets the district's rules, and I'm recommending approval with the conditions in the report.
I'll make a motion to approve permit application 18-041, pending the 4 stipulations the engineer has.
I'll second.
Okay, I just had a question. I'm sure you can answer this very quickly, but on Rule 8.0, on your page 3, Greg, it says the proposed project does not trigger this rule. The district is not the LGU for wetland impacts. But I thought this does discharge into a wetland.
It discharges into a wetland, but the wetland rule is related to filling of wetland. So if you were impacting a wetland, you'd have to mitigate that.
Okay, so flow into it is okay, filling is not?
Well, so filling is not regulated by the district. The city is the LGU for that. Flowing into a wetland is regulated with our stormwater rules, and that's why they have to incorporate the filtration basin per the rules.
Okay, so it goes in after the filtration? Is that
Correct.
what you're saying? Okay, very
Yep.
good. All right, thank you. That's it. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is the 2019 board meeting schedule.
And President and managers, you may recall that we suggested that the board also bring their calendars to let us know if there's any particular meetings that that might be missed, if they wanted to change a particular one, but these presently is based off our current schedule of the 4th Thursday. In addition, then starting in May, the second Thursday, with one exception being in April. We contacted the Forest Lake Association. They have their annual meeting on the 4th Thursday, so that one is the 3rd Thursday.
I have a question about that one. Since we were meeting longer on the 4th Thursday, is there any potential of the Lake Association moving that meeting? Not this year, but in future years? Just to
I
keep.
can look into that.
Yeah, just to
Sure.
keep the consistency of our meeting time. But this year, I have no problem.
I know.
Moving that to the 18th. Yeah,
I'll miss the February 28th meeting. I always miss that meeting, but I'll be back March 9th, which is a Saturday. So you'd have to move the meeting into early March, so you'd have 2 meetings in March, which is not good.
are you talking about the late January or February meeting?
February meeting, I'll
February,
miss,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then the meeting on January 10th, start time of 6:30, regular time? Okay.
Correct.
And the annual public meeting, that doesn't leave us a lot of weeks that are free of meetings. So if we're going to meet on the 18th, Forest Lake Association is the following week. Those first 2 weeks in April. When's Easter this coming year, do you know? We don't want to be on that week, that's for sure. April 21st? April 21st, okay. So avoid that week. But I really don't have a preference for that meeting. It's going to depend on where you can find a venue, I think. As long as we try to avoid the weeks that we have our regular meeting and the Forest Lake meeting, if at all possible. So I'm okay to leave that one open until we hear more from Jessica and staff. Is that okay with everyone else?
Yep.
Okay, and then in May for our annual district tour. I like having those on Saturdays. I thought that was very helpful. Oh, sure. Okay. when did we hold the last one? Was it a Saturday, like the second Saturday in May? Okay. So can we just leave it as the second Saturday in May for our district tour?
I think it was the first, Madam President, I think it was the
First?
first Saturday, because second Sunday would be Mother's Day.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right.
and
All
fishing
these
opener.
special days. As long as it's, you'll have to look at the calendar. You said April was the 21st, right? Easter, I mean, was April 21st, okay. That, we should be okay with the first
23rd, I
Saturday.
thought she said.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. I think those are all the holes that we needed to plug. And then the backside is the CAC meetings, and is this the proposal from CAC? Keeping it the same second Tuesday? Okay. And none of these are election days in November, right? November 5th is not election time? So,
Need a motion to approve?
yeah, we
the-
need a motion to approve with the changes that we made. or
I'll make a
additions.
motion that we accept the dates as discussed tonight.
Yep, and I would just add that the CAC will approve pending their approval.
Okay.
All right, I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're going to move up the, let's see, where is it? Oh, here we go. Under old business, we're going to take the first item A at this time. You're welcome.
Want me to come up?
Yes, please. And state your name for the record, if you would.
Bill Lynch, Comfort Lake Properties. So, where are we at?
Yeah, Mike, you want to start?
Well, Madam President, thanks, Mr. Lynch, for coming to the meeting here this evening. So after the last board meeting, we did in fact sit down both with the city and then the staff have worked out what's identified in the memo to the board. And then we have also communicated with you and understand that you're in agreement with the proposal here for what's proposed in terms of the reduction, or what we would hold.
Yeah, I want some I would like some clarification on that, though. I mean,
Sure.
I guess, what I do know is, we're reducing the letter of credit to 15,000. And then the bond was my question. Are we gonna reduce the bond by, 4 lots or 5 lots and just keep enough for the existing 4? Which would be about $19,000 a lot. Does that make sense? Because somebody had told me you wanted to keep the whole 17.4, but in the prior meeting, you talked about reducing that erosion control bond. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding,
I'm not either.
yeah, what you're asking, actually, so.
Well, what do you believe that was said and what we agreed to? I guess maybe we should start there.
Well, it was based off what the staff had meetings with the city. I was not present, but I'll, maybe the district engineer, if you were.
Was that the email from Mark Erickson?
Correct. Yep, so the idea would be that the city was recommending going down to 15,000 on the letter of credit, and my thought was that, or my recommendation would be to agree with that amount that the city is bringing that down, but to continue to hold the erosion control surety, the bond, until we work through this process of getting the permit closed out and those lots transferred or whatever is gonna happen. So instead of trying to complicate matters and divvying up the erosion control bond, just keeping that in place until the permit gets closed out next year.
Okay, didn't we have discussions about actually pulling those lots then out of the permit? Because we've already got the other 4 that have been transferred, and keeping the 15,000 until the seeding's been done, and then close out the permit? That was part of the conversation too. Because really, those lots are pretty stable. I mean, I know they're at least 70%. It was more the ditch is what we were concerned about.
Right.
Right.
I guess I was just trying to keep it simple and not have all this administrative work of divvying everything up. But if the board wants to consider reducing the erosion control bond as well, proportional to each lot, I think that would be okay. But it does create a bit of administrative burden to kind of divvy that up and release a portion of the bond. And I don't know how that works for you, if you have to work with your bank to do that as well. And
No, that's a separate company, the bond. It's a different deal. If you get, it's just, I suppose it'd be a resolution by the board, and I would just have to send it to them, they just reduce the amount of the bond. Or, we had talked about if I sold the last 4 lots, within the next, I don't know, couple months, and we do the transfers, what happens to the permit then?
well, the permit has to stay open until everything's inspected and improved. And
Okay.
what we talked about is that we'll have to wait until
Till spring?
springtime when
Okay.
that stuff is established. So I don't think there'd be a scenario where we'd be releasing all of it in the next couple of months.
Until the seeding's complete in the ditch.
Yep.
Okay, and that's fine, but then, I think we should just reduce the bond accordingly to keep it on the last 4 lots, because the other ones I don't own, so there's no reason for it, and they do have deposits with the board for their erosion control permits when they were transferred.
I guess I'll defer to the board if they want to do that.
Do we? Do we have bonds for each of the new homeowners?
Well, we have a permit application. I mean, we basically have a permit fee deposit.
For erosion control,
Correct, yeah, nothing else was triggered for those.
just on their lot? It has nothing to do with the
Correct,
stormwater conveyance systems and the development, right?
correct.
Well, the lots actually run into a lot of the stormwater conveyances in the ditches, by the way.
Well, I understand that,
Okay.
but the permit for the homeowner is only for their lot. Doesn't have anything to do with the build-out or efficiency of their
Okay.
stormwater conveyances.
Well, see, and that's been kind of the issues that it's been brought to my attention, that if these people aren't performing properly, like the streets needed to be swept on a regular basis and stuff, when the contractor who's building, which I said before, I have no power to make them do anything, that's up to the watershed, hence the permit transfer. So, fine, I guess whatever you want to say it, but I think for an instance, if somebody came in and said, I'm going to build on this lot, what would you charge them to do that? You'd have them do the permit application, you charge them $1,000, and that would take care of their erosion control. So we've got 2 separate issues. We've got the letter of credit for the stormwater portion, and then there's the bond for the erosion control. So I think it's only fair that those lots should be reduced to you're charging other people, since they are already seeded and graded and in good
Is the erosion
shape.
control for the developer actually for the lots, or is it for the construction of the subdivision infrastructure?
It's for both.
Okay.
So Bill is correct that we did talk about that previously, of some reduction to the erosion control surety proportional to what's been put in by those individual landowners. So if the
Well, what's
board-
common? I mean, you have more experience in other areas than we do with this. What's common?
That would not be a common practice.
Well,
Typically,
what's common practice?
typically the surety is held until the permit is closed out.
The entire lot permit or the entire development permit?
The entire development permit.
Okay, that's what I was used to in prior government positions. So,
Well, can I ask a question then? Because I was told that that's how you do it normally when a developer is the builder. And so that same owner's on the hook for the whole thing until it's built out. Well, this isn't the same. And that, you guys knew I wasn't going to be the builder from the beginning. So once I do sell those lots, I have no control over that. And I don't want to be held responsible for a contractor damaging or doing something to the stormwater system that is out of my control, and then I get held responsible for it. I don't think that's fair.
did the city decide not to take this over at the time? If I'm reading this correctly? They've changed their position from the last time that
Right,
we were
so
given this information?
the city handed me a checklist, which I completed, and some of those items were on your prior memos. And so when the watershed said, well, we're not ready to let him out of his permit, they went, oh, well, then we're not going to take over the maintenance of this project, which means the street and the stormwater management, which I disputed with them. I said that's not what was in my development agreement, it's not what I signed up for. And then they basically hung their hat on, well, you know, until it's 100% complete. And I said, well, you know, it's like there's ping pong going on here between, you know, I'm the ball between you guys and the city, and nobody wants to relinquish, you know, my liability on this and continually to keep me on the hook. So it's a problem.
You're a businessman, though. You understand that as a government body, we don't want to accept that liability on behalf of our stakeholders, our citizens. You know, we don't want to do that either. So.
No, I
so
understand, but,
everything has to be fair.
right, but there's a $300,000 plus bond that I have to give the city for 2 years once they take over. And in their agreement that you guys signed together, it states that the city will be responsible for this, the city will maintain this, the city will check on these things like every 2 or 3 or 4 years and stuff like that. So the further they can push that out, the less liability they have. So, you know, where do we draw the line?
Well, Greg, I'm going to ask you one more question as engineers with experience. This isn't common, but have you seen it before? And does the entity that has something like this maintain or reduce the risk,
So I would say.
increase their risk?
I would say it's not common for a watershed to release the surety until the project is done. However, I would say that it's not that it never occurs. I'd say that there's instances where portions of sureties are released as for larger projects that, you know, maybe get to a certain phase or whatever. That's more common in city projects where they kind of release it in steps over time, but primarily watersheds just hold the surety until the project is closed out.
And if I'm reading this memo correctly, on page 1, bottom, second to the bottom paragraph, district staff and engineers have inspected the site and do not find the stormwater features to be satisfactory for permit closeout and assurance release. And city staff has expressed support of the district's assessment. So the city is not going to be releasing anything at this time, or are they going to release a portion at this?
Well, they're releasing the majority. I mean, their total bond was, what, 200?
Oh, the total bond was $465,000.
Sorry. So they're reducing it down to 15. And the development is very close. There's just some areas that did not get established, and they've tried to get them established, but they're just kind of fighting the rains and whatever last year. So I mean, everything's very close, and I think it'll all be fine next year, but just kind of as being prudent, I think we need to just hold some money back to make sure things get all finished up
So
next
do you
year.
have to hold back the 240,000 that's left, or can you hold back less to make sure if something goes wrong and you have to reseed next spring?
Right, so the city's saying they're going down to 15, and the district currently is holding 17, is that? for
Well,
the-
you've got a bond for 17,400, and then you had the city hold 70,000 until the site was pretty much seeded and covered and had grown in.
But they're going down to 15.
So they want to drop it down to 15 now because,
So I think what Bill is saying is, some of those lots he's transferred those to other people, and those individuals have now put deposits down at the district.
right.
So,
And this
I-
amount that you're recommending, of 15,000, is adequate to protect the district?
the 15,000 plus the additional erosion control surety that the district holds.
Okay. Administrator Kenny has his hand up.
Madam President, I guess just for the manager's sake, Mr. Lynch, so, we have something in the memo that we're recommending. Could you provide to the board maybe what you're asking for specifically?
Okay.
So then we can understand what the difference is?
Is the memo you're talking, is this a new memo? Did this memo come out after the meeting?
Yes.
So I never received that memo. Because what, you probably figured I understood it from Mark Erickson? Is that right? Okay. So this is news to me too, December 7th. Okay, so you understand, yeah, I got you. So all right, just so you know, the 15,000 is just for seed and basically a couple areas, maybe on a couple lots, small areas, and then the bottom of the one ditch to the, what would it be? To the east or the west, Aaron? I can't remember. I get turned around out there. And so, I mean, there's just a small strip in the bottom that we couldn't get, every time the rain, these ditches would dry up, we'd seed them, and we'd get a little closer, and then it would rain and wash that away. So the next time it dries out, we're going to seed it and then blanket it, and that should probably take care of it, I'm assuming. Okay. So the 15,000's fine, and that's, for the seeding. The 17,400 for the grading and, alteration assurance is currently being held in the form of performance bond. So we've released half of the lots in that development we've done a permit transfer that the staff and the attorney had come up with. So those guys they're on their own. So I think the 15,000 for just the seeding, that's all that needs to be done, should be plenty. But I'm willing, what I'm saying is I still own 4 lots, so if, whatever per lot price you want to pull out of this surety, I'd be willing to leave that in. So I think it's like $7,000, $8,000 in addition to the 15.
According to this memo, it's not just seeding, it's vegetation and repair of any erosion or damages that may be caused due to the current lack of vegetation. So it's got 2 components to it.
Okay, so then somebody needs to tell me what needs to be repaired because everything's done. That's been my problem. I keep asking for people to tell me what else needs to be done, and so here we are, and this is what we came up with. I mean, do you want to hold the whole surety bond? Is that what you want?
No,
I
I just
mean-
wanted it to be clear for the record that there's 2 components. And my understanding is that this vegetation that needs to be done can't be done until spring.
Right.
And so this is just a protection for
Yep.
any damage that might occur before that actually, not just is seeded, but actually takes hold.
Well, I think it'd be pretty difficult you'd have to have a flowing brush down that one bottom of that ditch.
Well,
I mean.
things
it-
can happen, it's like insurance.
Well,
You just want to make sure that you're covered.
right, but
And
I
I
mean-
think that what the engineer's recommending here, 15,000, seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I agree 100%. I'm just talking about the other 17.
I don't think there's anything that,
Madam President,
Yes.
what he's asking on the other piece is that instead
Yeah,
of
I'm
the
fine with that.
17, he's basically effectively asking for it to be cut in half. And I think.
The bond, right.
Right. I don't think that, from the staff standpoint, and given the condition of the lots where they are presently, he's looking to market them as is.
Right.
And then we would work with the new applicant
For
on the erosion set of control.
Right.
so you're saying to reduce this 15,000 to 7,500?
No, the other, he's asking for,
The bond to be reduced, not the,
And I don't see the bond on here at all, so how much is the bond?
the bond is 17,400.
It's on,
right up here.
on the first one at the top paragraph.
And the recommendation from staff is what?
Well, that's why I asked Mr. Lynch what he was actually requesting, and so
Right.
that's what he's offered. I think it's something that the district could probably live with, but I don't know if the engineer has anything to offer to that, but I think from a staff standpoint, that would be something we could work with them on.
Yeah, I concur. We can work on it. I mean, should we, instead of working on it, should we just pick an even number? Like, the district continues to hold 10,000, and then the letter of credit at the city is 15? So that leaves 25,000 if something happens out there.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I want this established and done as much as you guys do,
I know
so.
you do.
We make a motion?
Because, I mean, it's a great development.
Take the recommended motion as it exists and then add a reduction in the bond to $10,000.
Correct.
Okay. So I'll make the motion, following the one that exists and adding, and a reduction of the current bond. Is it called something besides bond?
It's the.
Grading and alteration bond?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And reducing the grading and alteration bond to $10,000.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for Mr. Lynch, to hopefully all be on the same page. The additional step after tonight, moving forward, would be before the spring, to do the permit amendment,
Okay,
to carve out the lots that are not yet sold, and you're just gonna stabilize those.
right.
And once that's stabilized and the stormwater facilities are all in order, that's when the permit can be closed out and both sureties can go back.
Okay, that's fine, that'd be great.
Would you make sure that that gets captured exactly as Chuck stated it for the record?
Thank you,
Thank you.
that's great.
Okay, so now we're back to Washington Conservation District, 2019 service agreement.
Madam President, annually, the district reviews a service contract with the Washington Conservation District. Presently, there are two items in their technical service agreement, and then also the 2019 water monitoring services. We have done kind of an ongoing process with the Conservation District and then also the engineering staff to review those requirements. I do also want to note that I'll just hand out, so one of the things that's been plaguing us on the, from the water monitoring side was getting the results from the lab, which they had sent out to Met Council. And through a process, the Washington Conservation District staff was very supportive of our request to move up the timeline to receiving that data. So we did receive the first half of the monitoring data by the end of summer. And then now just last week or so, the Bond Lake Association asked if we could provide the monitoring data by the 15th or by this weekend. They're going to get a newsletter out, and then in advance of their annual meeting in January. And so we went to the Conservation District, and they were able to then go to the Met Council and got the set of data that they were looking for. So this is in fact the 2018 data for Bone Lake as requested. So we are getting definitely, I feel that we're getting some response to our requests in the services there. So, and now there will be another item later on that we'll talk about in terms of the grant pieces, but we've been pretty satisfied, and so the total agreement cost is $158,598, and that is staff's recommendation to approve that amount.
So did Dave get a copy of this? Dave Baki?
We just got it today.
Oh,
So we'll email it to them.
I'll make the motion to approve this contract. I do have some comments I want to mention in the comment section, but I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, I think I say this every year, but I'm so confused by this contract, and when I look at the technical services outline on page 5, it just appears to me that we're paying a lot of money for basic programs of the Water Conservation District, and it's replete in almost all of the paragraphs, starting with paragraph 3. So I want to make sure that when we are hiring them and spending this kind of money, that we're not underwriting their Water Conservation District education materials and processes and so forth, but they are specific to the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. That's what we're paying for. And it does not state that clear enough for me in this technical services outline on page 5. So I just want to make note of that again, and then maybe, Mike, you and I can spend some time, and I can show you where I think some of this language isn't strong enough to make that point. Because it gets very confusing for people, for example, in our BMP programs, when the initial site visit is done by Washington County, as Washington County. And then the follow-ups are done for us. So I'll show you what I'm talking about in this language. Yeah, go ahead, you have a comment.
Madam President, well, in that particular one, so the Conservation District does get an allocation from the county, and then that is used, I think roughly $100,000, and that is used to cover the first visit for any request, which is almost consistently done through the coordination of our office.
Yep.
And then we would also send a staff person with that Washington Conservation District person, and so to convey that it is in fact a watershed district response and program, just that we use them for the technical services for any recommendations, site design, et cetera. So I think from that standpoint, we do make a point, at least during the visits, to communicate that it is a watershed district activity.
Okay, and you've already addressed the timeliness of the information, so that's good, that's improving. Under 8, coordination and miscellaneous services, regular coordination meetings with the Watershed District Administrator and Watershed District Cost Share Committee. Do we have a cost share committee?
Well, it consists normally of this staff and myself, and then
Okay.
the person from the Washington Conservation District, and so we review each item that comes.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Yep.
Who that was, and then on the back page, page 6, when it's outlining all the stream and discharge monitoring, lake monitoring, and so forth, I had a question about Little Comfort Outlet. We've talked about none of that, especially when the road project was going on, that discharge into Big Comfort has never been monitored. I thought that was going to be added to 2019. Maybe that was just a grab sample that you were going to do. And then the other question was the inlet from Little Comfort, oh, excuse me, that's part of the same question. The other one was Shallow Pond Outlet. And I'm wondering if that's the Sunrise River at 256th Street?
It is.
Okay, very good. So that's covered. And then as far as that Little Comfort Outlet into Big, right by Highway 8,
Yes.
I think maybe you were going to do some grab samples or something by staff, right?
Correct. We did last year, and we would do so this year. We had hoped that we were going to get some additional funding
Okay.
from Clean Water Fund, but we will not.
Okay, that's
So,
fine.
but-
I just wanted to clarify that too. So, any other comments or questions about the contract? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next is MRAP.
Madam President, managers, we'll let you know that Angie Hong is in the audience if there are any particular questions. We have, as you see in the memo, the agreement itself is patterned after the past or earlier agreements. And I've just noted that the board itself, though, had during the budgeting process noted a different amount aligning with Carnelian Marine. But again, as noted, we just presented you with the agreement as is from past years. And if there's any adjustment, the board would need to make that action.
I just have a question under G, on page 2. The paragraph underneath the amounts paid by the districts. In-kind matches from existing educational staff from within partner organizations are also encouraged. The Water Conservation District shall provide $12,800 of in-kind match to the program per year. What does that mean? To this program or to a specific program?
I understand that they're, that the Conservation District itself is basically putting in $12,800 into the overall AMREP program as a partner themselves.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yep. Okay. And then under E, scope of services, I don't know if this is new or I've just missed it in past years, but partner-specific services will constitute approximately 15% of the total annual work plan. And that's overall work plan, right? Not to specific districts? Okay. So 85% of the total will be for beneficial use for everyone, education materials, not specific to a district. And then that 15%, is that work time or is that dollar allocation?
I don't know that we have ever broken that out. I would say staff time is the
Okay.
way we've always looked at it.
Okay. All right. So all the questions I had. Motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve the 2019 through 2021 service agreement between the East Metro Water Resource Education Program and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay.
That's up to the board. The amount is up. So the contract is, as presented, was 19,000, I think, 300. And I was just reminding the board, though, that during the budget discussion, the recommendation was to,
For 19,300.
well, to fund that much, but you were recommending that, that the smaller watershed district amount be amount, and then the balance be put towards our own pieces. So, but really, I guess it's, I did ask, and we have, well, we had received then here the 2018 updates and the 2019 planning. I think that the board has certainly seen a fairly substantial uptick in activity from AMREP in the last year or two. So I guess,
Yeah, I think,
either one is fine, whatever the board is. I just wanted to make sure that that we were following what was actually, I wanted you to be aware of what we had actually concluded in the budget process.
So it's 12,700 base, and then the extra is for district-specific communication pieces or education pieces? Is that what I heard you say?
No, the agreement based on the past ones would be 19,300.
Okay.
During the budget process, the board had just picked a different number, but if we want to stick to the 19.3, we can do that.
I think, because, we're gonna get, if we adopt the drain program, that's gonna be a big program for us. And so if the NREP can help us get that done, which they plan on doing according to the plan, that's gonna be worth the extra money, in my opinion, alone.
What was
Plus, we
the,
get,
what was the amount during budgeting?
19.3.
No, during budgeting?
Well, you budgeted the same dollar amount in full, but what the notes are is that you were looking to match the Carnelian Marine and then use the balance, roughly 7,000 or something, or just under, for district-related education activities. So you were still budgeting the same, so we still have the same total dollar amount in the district budget. You were just shaping it differently.
so the recommendation or the proposal should be 19.2 then, right? If we have to write something in here, because it's blank right now.
Or 19.3 if we want to match the
19.3, yeah,
actual
19.3.
agreement, right?
So 19.3 is the calculation.
Right.
All right. 19.3, $19,300.
Call the question.
And authorize its execution by the board president.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is Castlewood Ag BMP
Could I ask
agreement.
Angie a question? Angie, do you know with all the talk of chloride, going on the roads and they're
Well, no, we have the.
getting into groundwater and whatnot, is there any education on that? Or, I mean, people that are applicators of that, do they have to have any training or?
So there is quite a bit of education that's going on. There's not a required training right now. We've been working in partnership with Fortin Consulting to host trainings in our area for perhaps 7 years or so now. And we see the cities sending their staff, we see the county sending their staff, a lot of the quasi-public entities like school districts, sometimes churches or cemeteries. We've been having a really hard time reaching the private contractors. There was some limited liability legislation that was introduced last year that a lot of people were hoping might get passed by the Minnesota legislature, and that would have allowed private applicators that go through training to have some assurance against slip and fall lawsuits. And so we hoped that that might be an incentive to be able to get more to the trainings. And that didn't get passed. I think it's being reintroduced again during this legislative session, so we'll see how that goes. We have been stepping up some of the, public education too through community events and just articles in the paper. I know there was a suggestion from the CAC to try holding a workshop that was specifically for homeowners too. So we might consider doing that. I know that Mississippi Watershed Management Organization also has some instructional videos that they've put together for homeowners. So we're gonna put that on the Comfort Lake Forest Lake website and push it out through social media as well.
Some good news is Forest Lake has switched to this salt, liquid salt application rather than heavy salt, and they're doing that now the last couple of snowstorms. So they apply it before the snow comes, and then it enhances melting and saves a lot of salt.
Yeah, there's a lot of science behind it too, the timing and.
Different types of salt, there's like
Yep.
3 different types used based upon the temperature and.
Yeah, when they go to these workshops, it's a full-day workshop that they go to, and I know that the cities that have been implementing it have actually been saving a lot of money, hopefully without reducing public safety by just doing the right techniques and putting down pre-icing materials before a snowstorm and that kind of stuff.
I was just
Yeah.
curious, I
Yeah.
work at the Minneapolis Waterworks. They have their own plow drivers out there, and the amount that goes down on those parking lots out there right off the Mississippi River is.
I think, I think that's the gut sense that we all have, that we're making progress in the streets and the roads, and the parking lots is still a big contributor. But I think that a reason that happens is because of the fear of the slip and fall lawsuits, that people
Yeah, probably.
put a lot down, and so, trying to figure out a way around that.
All right.
I just wanted to tell you, if I didn't mention it at CAC, but when we were talking about this,
Yeah,
contact Maud, the Maud office, because at one of the seminars this summer, there was quite a citizen involvement group.
yes.
Yes, you know about that?
Well, they're the ones that
yes.
were pushing the legislation.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. They have a great presentation that would
Yes.
work for homeowners, so.
Yes, and they've been coming, well, they were coming for a little while to some of our watershed partners meetings. Most of them were originally master water stewards that had gotten trained. And we do also have the city of Edina just sent out a model salt contractor, what would you call that? Contract, that they had sent out for any other cities or people to use when they're hiring private salt contractors. So I'll be trying to get that out to people in our area too.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, next on our list is Banta assessment results, property assessment results.
Madam President, the Castlewood Ag BMP agreement is,
Oh, I'm sorry, I had that one crossed off. Yes, that's next on my list, thank you. It's right here in front of me. All right, back up, we're going to the Castlewood Agricultural BMP practice agreement.
so Madam President, managers, so we had a draft land rental agreement with the owner, and I was finally able to connect with the individual this morning, and we do have a final agreement, at least numerically, of what we're discussing. So if we look at the map, you can see that there are, there's an odd piece that's out there that we still have to deal with, but excuse me, the majority of the property is under one ownership. And in essence, the owner is agreeing to a 3-year agreement in which we would pay the first year $3,400. Got one too, but thank you. And then increasing $100 per year. So that's low on the end of the sort of the rental rate agreement range. However, the site appears to be in pretty significant need of lime, and from our last experience with a absentee landowner, and I've talked to the owner, there's been a long-term row crop situation, and she was not aware of any time in which the landowner tried to negotiate a scenario where they were putting on lime or other things that would be a corrective from an agronomic standpoint. So we would likely need to invest in some things like that. But we do know that there are 2 very strong candidates that would like to probably rent the hay once we got it established. Or that would take the hay for sale.
So there's no dollar amount.
So the dollar amount would be $3,400 for the first year, then increasing $100 each year thereafter for 3 years, and then go into an annual agreement after that.
3,400 for the whole thing?
Right, for the.
How many acres is it
it's
again?
Almost 51 acres, basically.
Oh, okay. So,
And
comes up to
300 per year? Is that what you said? So there's an escalation every year of 300?
100.
100, okay.
Yeah, so it's presently about 60, almost 67.
31 or 34?
34.
Okay. I'll make a motion to delegate authority to district administrator to execute the landowner agreement upon advice of legal counsel.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we move to the Banta property. Are you here for the Banta property?
Yes. Oh, Madam President, managers.
Yes.
Yes, so we have the land acquisition report, Emily Johnson in the audience, so water resource engineer at UR, who worked intimately on that report with Jason Neighbor. I'll just at first open it up. You know, the overall outcome from the assessment was that this site indeed does have a lot of promise for projects, given its location to the tax forfeit property and then also to adjacent parcels that were already identified as part of the larger Wyoming wetland enhancement project in the Sunrise River Flowage report. There's 5 different alternatives that were described. I can go into detail if the board has questions on those. Otherwise, I'll just say, you know, beyond those alternatives, moving forward in the future, if the district decides to pursue those, really they range based on the scope of project and cost, just what the district want to put in per benefit. Permitting constraints, there's one alternative that wetland permitting may or may not make it a feasible option. And then also whether or not you could get permission from 2 adjacent landowners to make for a much more comprehensive project. But in terms of the scope of work that the district approved as part of task 2 of this overall assessment, yes, there are projects that would have benefit to the district to consider for moving forward with acquisition.
Administrator Kenny, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
Madam President, managers, I did have the opportunity to speak with the city staff on what they're recommending with the now new owner. And it's really going to be a more simplified matter that they've recommended that they, if they are to proceed with the current owner, of transferring in some form by sale or donation, or whatever the case ultimately might be, of that 20 acres, it would be a simple transfer because we are owners of a lot of record to the west, so that would not create a new lot for the city's purposes. So that's what they're recommending to Mr. Stenke. So there's nothing, so my potential interpretation of the email was not accurate, so.
So they are encouraging working with the district, donation?
Just directly, well, sale, or
Sale.
whatever it might be. It's just, I think whatever he was originally contemplating versus trying to subdivide it. And
Okay. Okay, so I don't know, I don't really know where the next step is for this. I think as, this was a great report, by the way, very thorough. Thank you. I think the district, long-term, this would be an ideal property to have for our Sunrise River project. And we've had that on the shelves for a long time. The opportunities like this don't come along every day. And talking with some folks at the MOD conference on how much land like this goes in their areas, the price, yes. Your hand is up?
I wasn't raising my hand, though.
Okay.
If you wish to have a discussion about price, you do have the opportunity to go into closed session if you choose.
Yeah. It's probably not a bad idea. I mean, do we have to report in the minutes the discussion, or just that we had the discussion?
Well, to go into discussion, you need a motion and you identify the property. The discussion needs to be audio recorded, but is not part of the minutes. Ultimately,
Is it still public?
Ultimately, it will become part of the public record after you've made a deal or moved on.
Okay, well, then I will not mention.
Last time when we discussed the property, we went into closed session, then we reconvened.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know at what stage we needed to do that, but I suppose anytime you're going to mention price.
Yes, well, authority for the closed session pertains to discussing an offer or counteroffer for property. So it's about value, it's not about price per se. But obviously it is about price and any other factors that are relevant to you in deciding on an offer.
Okay. Does our staff stay in a closed session?
Yes,
Okay, including our engineering staff?
if they are
Okay.
necessary for the discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think that's appropriate. I'll make a motion that we go into closed session to discuss the Banta land acquisition report.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now in closed session. Okay, so just continuing on with my comments. Yeah, you can stay.
You guys can say,
Yeah, you're part of it.
We may want to ask you questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chair, also as a technicality, once you're on the closed session audio, you need again to identify the property.
Okay. Okay, we are now entering a closed session to discuss the Banta parcel land acquisition assessment report and potential property purchase. So just to continue on with what I was stating, I talked to people that I knew and trusted at MAUG, and were familiar with our district, and it was, I think how we feel as well is that this is a great property for future projects, conservation. Yes?
Madam Chair, Mike indicates that we're also being recorded
Oh.
publicly at this point.
Lake Area Television.
Oh,
So I don't know if we need to move it to the end of the meeting and then have them dismissed.
okay. All right, so this is awkward. We will move out of closed session at this time.
We can just confirm that there is somebody there.
I honestly think they leave, and they just leave it recording, kind of self-recording, but.
It's a good job they have. I can just sit there and read a book. Correct papers.
Wait until the end? Is that going to be best?
Yes, otherwise.
Okay, then I will move that we change the agenda and move the Banta property and McCullough property discussions till the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, Board of Water and Soil Resources 2019 grant recommendations.
Madam President, managers, you will recall that district staff had,
Madam President, McCullough property, I think is the agenda.
that'll be on the same discussion in the closed session.
Oh,
Yeah.
pardon, I missed that.
The district staff, with a lot of support from Dr. Funky and EOR, submitted 2 grant applications. One was for the revised Bone Lake subwatershed analysis. Work that you may recall we had initially, and then we had EOR redo that list based on the actual impact to the water body, the receiving water body. And so that ranked high enough. That item, let's see if I can pull up the dollar amount, I think was roughly $140,000.
144.
144. So that item was approved. The other one was for the diagnostic work for Comfort Lake. That was the monitoring piece that did not get approved. So. So we do have one grant that we're very interested in pursuing on this for the Bone Lake. Again, starting at the upper watershed, this will continue with our success in that area. And as you noted earlier, or you may have noted in the water quality monitoring results from 2018, we continue to see a real improvement in Bone Lake, and this will help us continue to finalize the long-term district goals for that area. So we're very pleased about that one. We will probably next week connect with Bowser to find out what items are within the Lake BMP scenario modeling, the accelerated implementation grant application, what it was that needed a little bit more to get it over the hump, so to speak. But of course, the score itself is actually not bad. I think it might as much to do with the fact that the funding available for competitive grants is declining, and so on a previous year, if you rank 16th with a score of 81.5, it would have been funded.
Okay. No action required on that, that's just a discussion.
Right, we'll eventually enter into an agreement or get all the, we'll start working with Bowser in January to get all the paperwork together to bring to the board.
Okay. All right, moving to old business. First item is Bone Lake Wetland Restoration.
Madam President and managers, so we have largely completed one of the larger wetland restoration projects out in that Bone Lake restoration areas. You may recall that this was another Clean Water Fund funded project activity. Presently, there are some minor deficiencies with the final berm elevations, and it's been EOR's recommendation to retain 5% of the full payment from Shoreline Landscaping. But overall, we thought the project went very well. The property owners was very pleased with the overall process and the outcome, and so we think it's fairly minor, but they were we did have specs, and the fall weather did not help between October and November's ongoing wet weather and trying to get this one shoehorned in.
This was one of those cluster of three, right, that we did in the southern part, south of Bone Lake, yeah.
South, right, it's east and southeast, but
Yeah.
mhm.
And
One
the
of the-
phosphorus reduction, I can't remember what it was. Is it on our chart? It's probably on our, is it on our project chart?
No, I would have to follow up with that.
Okay.
The specific for this
Yeah.
wetland.
I think it was around 50 or something like that, wasn't it?
15?
50,
Not that-
22, something like, I remember,
I mean, yeah, but
something in the
it was
20s.
One of the higher ones,
Comes
right?
to mind, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I'll make a motion to accept the engineer's recommendation of partial payment to Shoreline Landscaping in the amount of $22,946.82.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Just a question here.
Sure.
I just signed a check for Shoreline Landscaping for $24,154.
That's correct. So the plan is to void that check and issue a new one for the amount the board just approved.
Okay.
Where is that check?
I have the check here.
Okay.
Yep.
So you'll
Yep.
write the big void on it? Okay, thank
We'll
you.
do that tonight then?
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
You better initial that too, just as treasurer, just to be, you better initial that too. after she does the void, just initial it as the
Right,
treasurer.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, without further comment, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next is Shields Lake Fish Barrier Contract.
Madam President and Managers, we are bringing this back. You may recall that previously, producing companies out of Scandia had decided not to sign the construction agreement, citing increases in steel prices. So we went back and resolicited with a deadline of July 1st of 2019. And then so the quote present is the lowest responsible bidder, or not bidder, I guess, but estimate that we'd received. And staff's recommendation is to approve that, adopt the resolution that's included.
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 1812-01.
Any further discussion? Just out of curiosity, how much higher were the steel prices?
Well, we were never told, but
Oh, okay.
this contract is roughly 7,000 or something above what the original one was.
How much?
7.
Wow.
It's still within we had received a DNR Partnership Legacy Grant for the project, so.
Yeah, it's just more casual interest in how the tariff situation is affecting things, you know. Okay, so this is Steve, you made the motion, right?
Yes.
Okay, and Manager Mo seconded. This is a roll call vote, I believe. Is it? Yes. Okay, so Manager Anderson, aye. Manager Mo?
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz,
Aye.
manager. Okay, John Spence, absent. Jen Ochnick, absent. I've declared the resolution adopted by a majority of the members present. Okay, next is the 2019-2020 professional services contracts.
Madam President and Managers, the board had gone through a process both on October 25th and November 15th to make some final decisions to retain various firms for providing professional services, which are included in the memo. And then this is a recommended motion to authorize me, the administrator, enter into those agreements so they are executed, so we can start those at the beginning of the year.
I'll make that motion as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those-
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just for the record, Smith Partners will not provide counsel on the Smith Partners contract, but it's simply an extension of the existing legal services agreement with an adjustment of the hourly fees that you've reviewed.
Okay, should we have a separate lawyer review that? Yeah.
That is your prerogative.
Okay, okay. Well, I've made the motion already. Wayne seconded it, so we're in motion already. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next is the 2019 work plan.
Madam President, managers, we had provided a copy of the staff work plan, at least the details of it, at the November 15th meeting, and this was reflective of the final revised 2019 budget. And so, as we know, I mean, there are things that change throughout the year, and of course, one of them now is the approval of the latest Clean Water Fund grant application, which will result in some modification of some of the time allocated for different activities, but will be done so in accordance still with the approved budget.
Okay, I just had a question. I didn't bring a copy with me, but it's the last entry, and
There you
it's
go.
Oh, thanks. It's, yeah, I think we had a smaller one than that at the last meeting. Anyway, it was the listing for the Carnelian Marine Workshare Program.
Okay.
Yeah, here it is. This was a condensed version handed to the CAC committee, and I had a question from one of the advisors on the CAC committee about what this is. And as I looked at it, I wondered if this was correct, that we're listing the cost value here, but since we're getting paid for this, shouldn't that cost be zero? Because it's really not costing us anything, except time.
Correct, it's a net zero, correct.
Right, so should that be zero, is my question.
That's probably more accurate, correct?
Yes, okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the work plan with that correction.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Okay. Now, let's see, what's being moved down here? Report of administrator.
Okay, Madam President, you did have the consent agenda too that you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll do that after the report
Okay.
too.
All right. Maybe one thing I'll note for the board is that, so we had a half-time administrative assistant that had started just a couple months ago, but due to some health reasons, she has resigned. So staff has gone back to some of the applicants, and there was one that was a very close second, and we've met with that individual, and we are looking to have her start next week, so. But we'll finalize that once we get there, but,
So you had somebody from the first round of interviewing that was available, that's good. Saved a lot of time,
right? Yep.
that's great. And what's her name? Or his name?
Her name is Deborah Floor.
Okay. All right. I'll just talk to Aaron afterwards. I just needed an explanation on how the averages of the complaint items worked. It's more of a clarification, so I'll just talk to you about it. But thank you for giving those. This report that we have here, is this from Angie, right? This is the Realtor training course?
Yes.
Yeah, this is really good. I'm glad she shared that with us. It's nice to have some quantification of those programs. That's not a bad format for us to think about for some of our other projects that we do, education projects. Okay, EOR, anything further?
Just briefly, for almost most of the projects are on this agenda, but all of the assessments and feasibilities have been postponed to January and February, just given the length of this meeting to date. So I think, Mike, the board received the Little Comfort Assessment Report. Yes, okay, there I see it. And also the JD6 Feasibility Assessment Report. And then in addition, at the January 10th meeting, I'll also share the effectiveness monitoring results.
Yeah, you all know what she's talking about, this pack here, and this was placeholder for today. All of these reports will be discussed at that special meeting on January 10th that we just approved on our calendar. It was just too burdensome to have all of that at this meeting.
And then also at future meetings, the Hayward and Castlewood will be at a separate meeting to kind of space those out, so it's not everything in one go.
That's helpful, you know?
But those are forthcoming.
Okay. Smith Partners?
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll do the minutes now. And,
Madam President, if I could add maybe one more thing. Did have staff pull together, Jessica asked, put this little PowerPoint together of our Shields Lake project, only because we did finish the major construction. It is the largest project to date. And I've told the EOR staff, I said, it's a great project when I don't hear from them. So, but I did want to show some photos because, it did, November was not necessarily a very pleasant month, but it does give some scale to the activity and such. So here they are preparing for the directional drilling of that pipe. And I took a close-up there. That's a quarter. So it'd give you a scale of how thick that pipe is that they had to pull through there. So, because it's certain points it's roughly 20 feet deep. So I was a little bit surprised at that by the thickness. Here's a little bit view down towards the area that was just maybe at the very beginning of the project there, facing from that little hill downward to the south. And this is a photo then of the excavation of that pond area. This is that outlet from the pond, then continuing to the overflow for the existing channel area. This is the back side then that you could see how much material was being removed or moved.
looks like the pits at Ely.
Another good photo of just the mass grading. That gives you an indication of the size of the pond. And this is facing south. And you can see in the upper left-hand side there, the photo with that culvert. Once that would be the what would have been the natural elevation for the discharge of that channel previously. So now when the water gets that high, it would naturally discharge out and continue down to Shields Lake through that neighborhood. But you can get a sense of how large the storage area is.
Wow.
And there it is, all tucked in, ready for winter. That's all erosion control blanket across that entire area.
Wow, that's great.
Well, there's some mulch, or some blown straw, but for the most part, yeah, we're all ready to go.
Very nice.
Nice.
Okay. So the minute revisions, starting on page 6. The state of the watershed discussion under B. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up over on the right side where it says would be a more formal version. It was an appropriate format than an open house, because we're having presentations and we had that discussion about having people there at a certain time for the presentations. So if you can make that correction. And then under D, third row down, starting with noted, after 2018, it's the MBO review. And then under the, on page 8, the discussion of our professional services contract, specifically the engineering. I wanted it captured, the statement I made about the differences between those two contracts, the 3% or COLA increase versus a steady rate for the 2 years. And you can pull that off of the, a shortened version of that off of the tape. But that was my rationale, so I wanted that included. And that's it.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
He's changes?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And we'll do the treasurer's report. We'll go in order here until we get down to the number 12. And I think if that's okay with our legal advisor, can we go into closed session on 2 topics? And just do this at one time, discussing the properties as well as this?
Yes, you can, as long as the motion specifies the reasons for both topics.
Perfect. Okay. And I think it's appropriate, just checking with the other board members here, that we have the engineering staff stay for the property portion, but not for the review portion, okay? Just so that's clear. Okay, Steve, you're up with the treasurer's report.
Income for this month was $17,383.32. Expenses, $168,591.03. Before I ask to have this approved and paid, I looked at the expense voucher for our expense report for this month. We're about $780,000 below spending where we should be for our lake projects, and most of that is in Shields Lake. So are we gonna get more billing, Mike, in this whole area or not, by the end of the year?
Well, I think it's largely the Shields Lake project that hasn't been paid yet.
Because we're gonna be way underspent if we don't bill a lot in this last 3 weeks, unless we get bill in early January against last year, against this year.
Right, that's what happened. We did not, they knew that they had to have everything to us by November 30th in order to get paid, but they were waiting for some of their subs to get their invoices in. They just said, well, they'll submit it, it'll get paid in January for 2018 though.
And it'll be credited to 18 then?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, so actually I'm asking then for $168,591.03 to be approved and paid for this month's expenses.
I'll move.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Report of officers and managers. Wayne, start with you. Manager Mold, Manager Schmaltz?
Nothing.
Okay, I have nothing. Summary of approval of board direction.
Madam President, our understanding from tonight's meeting is that there is no new items to be added at
Okay.
the board direction.
Great. All right. So you asked for an approval, so I'll move approval of the board direction summary.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we are moving into a closed session to discuss 2 topics.